Hi, Martin. It's great to see you again.
Hi, Heather. How are you?
I'm good, thanks. I'm really excited to have another chat with you today. I've read your book, and as we have our talking points, there's always something to be learned. Can you just share a little bit about your approach to business with Optimize the Moment and from war zones to boardrooms? Optimize the Moment when strategic planning fails.
Thanks very much. Yeah, I was delighted to write the book. It's been in the work for 25 years. I found this the moment to write the book because we are in some very turbulent times. And the book is about decision-making in the crucible of those crises. I chose not to call the book Optimize the Crises or Survive the Crises. I guess I could have done. But I talk a lot in the book about, what is a moment and the importance of those moments in our lives, in our personal lives, in our corporate lives, whatever organization we're part of. And I certainly get the feeling now that as a society, we're in a moment collectively. As we see events unfold around us, it seems every time we get together, there's another moment, another instance, another example of the turbulence all around us. The book is largely about decision-making and how difficult the decision-making is in those turbulent times, and some examples and things, methods, an approach to making decisions in very difficult times. And of course, some of the examples we're looking at today are, the rise in hate and the division that's causing in our society, the anti-Semitism, we're seeing, of course, playing out on our screens, the war that's playing out in Israel and Gaza, and of course, the awful scenes that are playing out, but also the divisions that's causing here in Canada, the U.S., and pretty much every country around the world.
We're very polarized in this day and age as a society. We're polarized on opinion. And what are your thoughts on that in terms of the public discourse?
Well, it's hard not to be affected, right, emotionally, by the scenes that we're seeing. This goes back. The history behind this is cultural to us as human beings. That it affects us. So it's not surprising that people are unsettled. We're churned up by what we're seeing. Where we came from, our background, how we were raised. This gets at kind of our core and who we are as people and our background. So it's not surprising that people have strong opinions about this. So that's not surprising. What's surprising to me is that somewhere along the way, I think we lost the ability to have what I'm just going to call a healthy public discourse or debate about things. Mm-hmm. Maybe it's the nature of these particular types of issues. But even before this, there are policy issues and things that have been on the table in our communities, and in our culture in recent years, there's been this: if you're not with me, you're against me, yes, and therefore I hate you.
Yes,
and it's strong language that comes out, and we see it in our communities. We see it play out, and it's really not good.
It seems like it's being fueled by any technology brings its benefits and downsides. And there is a mass-to-mass communication. But to your point, in Canada, for instance, our culture here, and I'd say in the United States, it can be black and white. And most of us are from somewhere else.
Yeah.
And so when you talk about leadership and decision-making, we've talked about a sense of passivity, of not making those bold decisions, of not calling something out in the right moment, of perhaps being afraid of consequences.
Right.
How would you flesh that out?
So in this environment in which we find ourselves, where there is so much division, where there is such strong emotion, one of the consequences of that is that people are afraid to make a decision. Whether it be on a board, whether it be in a city council or a school board or whatever level, there's so much fear around making a decision or offending somebody. The absence of a decision is in fact a decision. And
True.
And that has consequences in itself. So there's so much kind of self-regulation or self-mitigation on these boards and on these committees and things. With the passage of time, even these last 3, 4, 5 years, we end up with a culture, by consequence, that creates this passivity and, I'm going to say, decisions that we collectively don't actually want. We don't want but they're made because of a lack of leadership, a lack of an ability to make decisions. We end up with some rather strange decisions.
Interesting that you say not making a decision is a decision.
Yeah.
There's also, what I'm hearing from you is, there's critical analysis and then there's deference.
Yes.
So what have you seen, and what would you advise when people are, and this can be in a family as well, right? It doesn't have to be.
I see it in families. I see it in not-for-profit organizations and sporting clubs. Right. There's just a willingness. So instead of making a decision or working through a decision together, or having let's say, having a difficult decision or a discussion.
Yes. Uncomfortable.
An uncomfortable discussion. We're just going to accept the status quo rather than ruffle feathers, because we just don't want to have the discussion. We're just going to shrug our shoulders and say it's okay.
Yeah.
And I sit on a board now of a not-for-profit that, instead of having the discussion, they've just decided to accept ongoing deficits. Instead of saying, well, this is actually going to put us out of business in a definable period of time, and why don't we instead have a discussion about a different business model that'll correct that?
Yes.
Rather than having the uncomfortable conversation, they would simply rather, I'm going to say, cower and accept the status quo. This is what we have bred kind of into ourselves over these last few years. And it's not healthy. We used to have a time, you used to belong to a debating society.
I launched one.
You launched one. So that, we used to have these public forums, these public kind of policy forums where that kind of healthy debate, we used to, when we were at school, when I was at university, we used to have healthy, debating kind of circles where we would have, those debates and those discussions. And quite often, about very serious, difficult topics in society. And now, there's even in the media, they're deemed to be either taboo or too harsh or something, where we cannot seem to have those, you're either for me or against me, and therefore I hate you. And those harsh lines are drawn. And it's no longer acceptable to say, you and I can have a discussion, we can disagree, and it's okay.
Yeah, where the purpose of disagreement is progress.
And as a result, I see this in companies and company leadership all the time, where they surround themselves with quote-unquote like-minded individuals. And I see that as a recipe for disaster. The companies and organizations that get it right are the ones that surround themselves with contrarians, people with different views, different opinions, different experiences, different backgrounds, because they're looking for those new ideas, those objective ways of looking at things, those different ideas. Those are the leaders who actually want to grow their knowledge base, their experience base, their companies. They want to be the best companies they can be.
Mm-hmm. It's funny you say that, because diversity is critical in this. I think you need to in any business, in any public-facing business or consumer-facing business, you want to reflect the demographic you're serving so people can identify with it, because everybody does bring a different opinion. And where I would say, as a woman, as 50.5% of the population, I look at cultures where women do not have a seat at the table, and I just think you're missing half of your population in terms of innovation, how they approach issues. Maybe soft power is a way to go sometimes, as opposed to hard power or no power. Can you elaborate on the part of active? You talk about active listening in your book. It's a really important trait.
It's one of those skills that does not come by default for starters.
Yeah.
So thing one is just the recognition. I think that active listening is not inherent, that it is actually a practiced skill and something you have to think about doing deliberately.
I like that it's deliberate.
It is deliberate.
You have to be deliberate.
Bill Clinton became, governor first and then President Clinton, and he had a coach. He had a communication coach all through his career. And his communication coach taught him to speak, both in terms of his voice range and at pace, but also in terms of his ability to listen. And he talked a lot about that. And so have been obviously a student of communication and a student of human behavior for a long, long time. And that's one of the things that always stuck with me. As someone who coached communication, that the listening part and how actively, he was one of the greatest orators and speakers of our time, and how, as he got older, his ability to, and how the methods with which he would speak, his voice range within which he would speak, and his pace and how he listened had to change. So his skill, how he practiced that, had to change over time.
Yes.
So we have to think about our skills. You think about a sport. I'm not a fan of sport analogies, but if you're a golfer or you play baseball or something, as you get older, the technical part of your sport, you actually have to practice differently over time.
Change your tactics. Tennis is a great one.
Tennis or golf.
Place the ball.
Golf is a very technical.
Yes.
So as we change physically over time, we have to change our golf swing. We have to change our baseball swing. So we have to change our communication skill as well.
Sorry, go ahead.
So that was my point. But the listening part of that also has to change as well.
Yes, and it's interesting you brought up Bill Clinton, because when he first appeared at the Democratic National Convention, DNC, he was a bloviator. The man talked forever. Yeah. And by the end, I saw him speak once in a very small venue, and he was magnificent. I've seen Obama and I've seen Clinton back to back, and they're both brilliant with a completely different style. And Bill Clinton, when he speaks to you, he's speaking to you. And there's this level of not just his active listening, but the way he gives you time actually causes you to actively listen to him. So he doesn't need to say as much. So it's a really interesting insight you've shared about as you change with time, what you get older, with more experience, more confidence, you probably know what to say, and it's not as wordy. How does this apply when we're talking about, you've talked a lot about, let's just say, the recent rise of anti-Semitism. We've seen, references to Hitler, inappropriate references that I would say historically we thought had been put to bed. But it seems to be that when there's a lack of context, people fall back on scapegoating. They fall back on division. How do you coach out of that to get people to do the critical thinking?
Well, it's shocking to see, first of all. I mean, the Olympics are on right now, and we're seeing, people in the stands doing the Nazi salute and screaming Heil Hitler while the Israeli anthem is being played. The visual of that is something that I never thought I would see in my lifetime. It's shocking. Here in Canada, the school bus is literally firebombed and blown up outside of a synagogue. It's horrific.
Synagogues getting shot at, protests in front of people's houses.
There unfortunately, the list goes on. Mm-hmm. And we can't ignore it, right? So if you're a leader of a company, you can't just sort of say, well, it's business as usual. We're just going to focus on our business and we're going to carry on as if that's not happening, which unfortunately is what I think a lot of businesses are doing, because underneath, right, every company is made up of people.
Yes.
And the people
from everywhere. All beliefs.
Of all beliefs. And each one of those, if you choose that mindset where you're just going to ignore that it's happening, stick your head in the sand, which is
status quo.
What's happening is a lot of the emotions are festering underneath. And I've seen this now here, where you've got companies where you've got people from both sides working side by side, mm-hmm. Whether it be on a loading dock or in some other aspect of the company. And if you're the leader of that company and you think that's going to work out well, or that those individuals are going to be okay working together, they might be for a while, but if there has to be a strategy in place that says, A, you're going to listen, you're going to pay attention, you're going to understand culturally what's going on around the world is going to affect the people that are working for you, that are on your team, that you're asking to implement the mission that you've provided. And if you're going to ask them to implement the mission you've provided while all these other things are going on around the world, you better have a strategy for how that's going to play out.
How would you advise on that if I was a leader? What are some of the tactically, what could I do to empower people to express themselves in a civil way, to talk about how they're feeling about it without dwelling on it too much? If we're talking about business, because I think you've made the point before too, and 98% of our businesses in Canada are small businesses, and that statistic rides over to a lot of Western countries. So when people disrupt the business model or disrupt the family life, in the business case, that has an impact on livelihoods.
Yeah. So the short answer is it depends on what kind of business it is, right? So as at least 98% of the businesses in Canada are small businesses.
Yeah.
It's not quite that high in other jurisdictions, but it's a large percentage. So, people, there's stress, there's anxiety, there's, people play these things out in different ways. So whether you own a small business or it's a family business, or your friend's family business, right? People are related.
Yeah.
Or it's another kind of organization. It's a not-for-profit, it's a church, other kind of religious organization. That, I think job one it is, and it sounds trite to say perhaps, but it's that awareness factor, right? That
yes.
These emotions are running high. These geopolitical events are affecting all of us, are affecting our stability or instability, how unsettled people are. And the first thing to do is get people help when they need help. Right. And not be afraid to offer people help when they need help, because help is available. Our communities have actually stepped up, and a lot of places do offer help for that kind of stress and that anxiety and angst. So, that sounds easy to do, but I've done it. It's available and it is there, and it's really important, right? Because I can't underestimate this, right? Because it is saving lives.
Yeah.
Right. The other thing to do is deflection. Deflection is a tool that you can use to help give people an opportunity to put that energy and that emotion somewhere else. So if I am emotionally upset and angry about what's happening over there, and I choose to take it out on you, I have the opportunity as a leader to deflect that energy somewhere else. So I have to think about that ahead of time.
Yeah.
I have to have a tool or a resource or a place where I can give that person the place to direct that energy or that emotion, at least for a period of time, until they can do something more productive with it.
And can you give me an example? I'm just trying to follow you on this.
Well, again, it depends a bit on the size of the business, but if I've got somebody working in one part of the business, maybe I can ask them to go and do a different job, in another part of the
business. Or train, or do something.
Or train. Yeah. Training is a great deflection. Ask them to go and do some training for a period of time. Ask them to go and do a different task for a period of time. Something that stimulates the brain in a different way, or doesn't stimulate the brain in a different way.
Yeah.
But deflection is really, really, really important. Give them something else to think and feel about for a period of time.
And how about when we talking about working with people and airing those differences? Do you think there's any value, especially in the more manageable organizations, or let's just say even if you're in a big organization, being in a group from a leadership perspective, just taking the time to have a 20-minute discussion about a hot button issue?
So I'm of the view that if I'm the leader of a company and I'm trying to define a mission for my company and have team members, obviously I want to share that I care about my team members.
Yeah.
Part of the way that I share that I care about my team members is to share that I care about their health and their well-being. It's not my job to provide that health and well, right? I'm not their therapist.
Right. Fair.
I am more than happy to provide a therapist for them.
Yes.
I'm more than happy to encourage them to go and get healthy, be healthy, and to be, and whatever that means. And I will support them in doing that in whatever way I can. But I'm not their trainer. I'm not their therapist. I'm not their doctor. I'm not.
Yeah.
I'm not. That's not for me. I am going to support my team and encourage them to be as healthy and to care about their well-being as much as possible.
Okay, so the approach is a very professional one. When you're running a business, that you want to make sure it's employee-focused. And so it's not an ask me anything question. That's different. It's not going to management and saying you could talk about anything. This is seeing that there are issues, external issues erupting, whatever they may be, that have nothing to do with where you are at any given moment. But when you have someone who's identified as not agreeing with you, we've talked about this too, that it's okay not to agree with someone.
Yeah. Okay. So that's a different question, right? So,
yeah.
If I am the leader in that scenario, I absolutely want to know when people don't agree with me, right? So creating that environment where time is always the enemy, and I hear this all the time from leaders and CEOs that they just don't have the time to sit there and have the conversations with the people around them, to hear, when people don't agree, or the good ideas, or the ideas they never thought of, or why that other idea was a stupid idea. And yet, so the big challenge is to make the time.
Prioritize it.
Right.
Yeah.
And I'm guilty of that. So
I think we all are.
We all are. So it really is about when we find the time and we make the time. Quite often, the people around us will step up.
Okay, another question for you, because we've seen a lot of casualties coming out of this. Is one example we're giving. We could have other podcasts on other examples. There are plenty of topics where people have polarized views. But in this case, people are losing their jobs.
Yeah.
So what can you do as in an organization to either prevent that from happening? Because as you know, we live in a world where a lot of people like to publicly share their views. And in that moment, they may think it's a good idea. But if they haven't thought it through, it can really be destructive. And those things tend to last beyond a job.
So you're asking me about the suggestion for the employee or for the employer?
For leadership, someone in a leadership position. So if they have done something, like what would you advise leaders on how to conduct yourself? And what would you advise leaders on how to manage your team?
So, we have talked about this before, where, if where the mission is set, and the mission is set around a set of principles and values, and you put together the team to implement that mission that's based on a set of principles. Yep. The rule is you abide by those principles.
Right.
If you don't abide by the principles, you're gone. And, I've told you the story before about Merrill Lynch, and one of the reasons I loved working for Merrill Lynch was because those principles hung on the wall, and they walked the walk. It didn't matter how big a producer you were for the company. It didn't matter how much money you made on any given day for the company. That was not the measure. The measure was whether or not you respected the principles that hung on the wall. And if you, I remember quite vividly those days when they marched out of the firm, some of the biggest producers in the firm, because they did so loudly and they did so publicly. The bigger the producer, the more loudly they marched them out of the firm, because they wanted to send the message that those principles that hung on the wall mattered. And they knew that the day they marched them out of the firm, the next day there would be 10 more from the competitors that wanted to join the firm, because we all wanted to work for a firm that actually cared about principles and values and doing things ethically and responsibly. And so that's how you create culture, right? It's that kind of consistency. It's that kind of, I go back to what we were talking about earlier, which was, making business decisions that stand up to scrutiny.
Yes.
And so in this environment where we are, where there's a lot of hate and a lot of angst and a lot of discord and a lot of, friction between people, one of the things we can do as leaders is unify people around a set of principles, around a set of values. Respecting individuals' personal beliefs, absolutely. But unifying people around a core set of principles and values that, we're going to work together on delivering, that works.
For sure that works. When you say that, I think the unifying is really critical there, because a lot of people don't know where they belong anymore. We move a lot in our lifetimes. Mm-hmm. Our society, with floating on a housing market, people slip. You don't know who your neighbors are. People aren't going to church, synagogue, mosques at the rate that they used to 20, 30 years ago. People are changing their careers all the time. I love it. So when you unify people around that purpose, the principle, have a shared mission, they will naturally listen to each other
Yeah.
support each other, work looking forward instead of looking back or at each other in conflict. They will have a singular purpose where they're unified to move in the right direction based on principles.
Yeah.
So it's principle-driven leadership.
It's one of the reasons why I have so much respect for professional civil servants. The one of the things that unifies them is that sense of duty, sense of public service.
Mm-hmm.
The people in the military that I've known for years and years, it's a sense of honor, it's a sense of duty,
Yeah,
and it unifies them.
it's perfect. So we can talk about Operation Unifier another time. Of course, you go into more detail in your book about these concepts.
Yeah.
Where can people buy your book to optimize the moment from listening to this?
Well, it's widely available. It's available through the Amazon platforms, here in Canada and U.S. and around the world. Also in Canada, it's available through Indigo, and in the U.S. through Barnes & Noble, and in the U.K. through Waterstones.
Terrific.
So pretty much available.
Hardcover, softcover,
and the ebook.
and digital ebook. Martin, thank you. It's been a pleasure as always. I learned a lot. Thank you for sharing your knowledge and your expertise and your experience.
Thank you. My pleasure as always.
Okay. Martin Rust with Optimize the Moment.